Salut tout le monde. Hello and welcome. It's blog time. So today I am going to be looking at listening to the drum sounds that we recorded a couple of weeks ago with Daniel J. Logan of Orchard Studios, session drummer, engineer, all-round lovely bloke. Now I had modded a unit for him. It was an old Altec PA amplifier actually, with two inputs and two mic inputs and a line input. And I'd done a modification on that, sort of basically got rid of all of the power stage and converted it into a more user-friendly, studio-friendly preamp. Now they're really temperamental because of their age. It's sort of 1960s. Altec, if you don't know about Altec, check them out. They did some amazing pieces of gear, and they were often sold as PA equipment, but they had some great sounds to them. In fact, Abbey Road picked up one of the Altec compressors and modded it, and it was used heavily during the 60s, I believe. In some of those Abbey Road recordings that you probably have all heard. So anyway, enough babbling. Let's go over to the computer and have a listen and see what sort of results we got. You'll notice some of the I think it was the overheads we recorded through the Altec. We have varying degrees of crunch on that, so we could do sort of more characterful approaches to drum recording. So yeah, let's have a look in Mixbus and see what we've got.
Hey, so we are over in Mixbus, of course, and I have the drum tracks here. Just 4 mics that we used, very minimal setup, very kind of retro feeling, hopefully. We did some overdubs with the overhead mic for brushes and washes, and of course everything else we brought in as stems, because this isn't for the actual record. So we just brought in stems to avoid having to replicate a huge file with lots of edits in it and so on. Keep everything nice and separate, and allow me to give different monitor mixes to Dan if needs be, and maybe move the mix a little bit around these new drums. Let's have a listen to see what the whole thing sounds like together.
Avignon shone like a jewel.
Cool, so you get the general gist of it all. Right, so first off, we've got kick. Let's listen to the kick without any processing. That's cool, but there's a lot of snare spilling into it. So I use the XT-EG gate, expander gate. This is just one of its many uses. I'm not being too aggressive with it, but probably being more aggressive with it than I would be on a track, kind of middle of the road, sort of easy, kind of mellow track like this. Have a listen. Now I've gated it relatively hardly for this kind of drum sound, but I've done that because I want to keep the bottom end really tight. Now I want to be able to boost the kick drum as needs be, EQ it and treat it without treating too much of the snare drum. And if we zoom in, we can actually see, you can see that the snare is spilling into the kick mic, and that's perfectly normal. That happens on pretty much every live drum recording session that you do. So it's not something to worry about, but it's something that we can manage. And one of the cool ways we can manage it is using the sidechain filter. So I've focused in on a frequency of 77 hertz. Let's listen to what the expander gate is actually triggering from. So really what we're doing is we're EQing the input signal and using that to trigger the uneq'd, the gate that will pass the non-EQ'd audio. We could push the depth a bit further and change the attack and release settings. There's 3 levels of look ahead, but this is good for now. I also use the drum character plugin, and I like this plugin so much. It's in the Russell Cottier mix bundle with the vocal and bass plugins, and that EG Expander Gate XT-EG. And you can find out more about that at mixbundles.com, or go to the Harrison Consoles website and look at this shop special store. It's American special offers section, the specials section, I should say. And there's lots of bundles there, but yeah, find one to suit your needs. So this basically chops up the bass drum into an attack and a tail section, and we can apply a different EQ to the attack to the tail. So let's see it in action. So basically, I'm applying 6553 hertz, a curve centered around that frequency, just to the attack, and I'm giving a little bit of a boost around 57. Normally I'd be maybe 10 hertz above that, actually, sort of around the 80 mark, and normally I would cut around the 500, maybe 1K 500. But this sounded good for this particular drum. So basically what's happening is we're adding click to the start, the attack, and we're adding oomph to the tail of the track. Okay, so I added some more EQ. Just a little bit of sparkle around 7-8K. And I added some compression. Something like a 3-to-1 ratio. It's on the compressor mode, and it's just taming the very loud kicks, just to try and bring things a little bit more consistent. You notice that Dan drops his level down here. Part of that is him sort of fading out, but part of it is that he hits less hard when he is playing a more complex drum pattern, which is kind of natural, but we want to just kind of smooth that consistency out a little bit. Let's move on to the snare top. There's no gate on this. See if you can figure out why. Yes, it's all those ghost notes. If I gated this, we would lose all the nuances. So we don't want to do that. It would be hard to gate it effectively and keep all of those in this situation. So I let it be natural. There's not much of cymbal spill because of the mic position and the way Dan plays. So we got away with not being too aggressive with that gating. So I just added a little bit of EQ. I high passed at about 128-ish, something like that, just to clean up some of the nonsense from the bottom. Normally I would, spill, low end spill. Normally I would probably high pass around 200 with the snare. But this sounded good, and I added a little bit of sparkle, again around 7-8K. Now, if I wanted to add a compressor, which I wasn't 100% sure on actually, again, I'm just using the standard compressor mode, and I'm basically using this to comparatively decrease the level of the transient. So have a listen. So can you hear how the snare sounds longer? The hits sound as if they last longer. Basically what's happening is we're pulling down the start, the attack of the snare, and I'm using a makeup gain to increase the overall level. So the tail effectively comes up in comparison to the transient, and the transient is kept at the same volume as it was before implementing the compressor, so it makes the whole thing sound fatter. Okay, snare bottom now, my least favourite mic. I'm not a big fan of snare bottom. No, just generally. But, sometimes it's necessary. So, obviously it's flipped in phase. I don't know why I didn't record it flipped. You'll remember from some of my other videos that we have a optimized polarity function. If you press R, select your drums, or select an area of drums and right click, you can go optimize polarity, and that lets you audition different polarity flips configurations for the for whichever tracks you've selected. So that's a good way to make sure your drums are all kind of in correct phase, if possible. Usually the snare bottom mic needs either flipping when you record it or flipping in the mix. So I just added some very aggressive high pass filtering. There's not a lot of low end spill in there, but it's good to clean it up and add a bit of sparkle. And that's all I did really with that mic. Okay, finally, well, not finally, but now we get to the overheads. Now this is where it got interesting, because this was what I was really experimenting with, trying to get a sort of a retro-y kind of vibe out of this modified Altec. And we tried a number of passes in different varying stages of cleanliness and distortion, and we settled on this one as quite nice. Now, you'll notice that the toms don't pop out as much because they are running into clipping, and it's sort of, I don't know whether there's some compression in that unit as well, some kind of compressive effects. But the clipping in itself is basically reducing the dynamic range. So this is what we have, and it seems odd for like an easy kind of middle of the road sort of mellow track. It seems like it's quite an aggressive sound, but it seems to work really well in the track. So without the EQ, you'll notice that there's a lot of low end in there, and I don't want that muddying up my nice low end from the kick drum, because it won't be in phase. So I've just high pass filtered and added a bit of sparkle again to the top around 7K.
But you couldn't see there was a time I would have tried.
So you get the general gist of it from that, and I'll add the EQ again. Now, sometimes when I'm doing rock records and I have a room mic or an overhead mic that I really smash, I smash it through the preamp, I smash it through an 1176, for example, sometimes in all buttons in mode. And you can get that kind of a good effect similar to that by rolling forward the ratio really high on the internal compressor in Mixbus. And obviously you have to use some makeup gain, but this is the kind of sound that I would probably use on as a sort of a room mic on a rock record, and you can blend that in more or less. See how it makes it sound more aggressive and as if it would play louder. Now without. It makes a massive difference. Okay, so we've got brushes. We didn't really do much with the brushes, but I'll let you listen to them. There's one cool bit where Dan does a sort of swish before the toms come in, so I'll put that on. So it's a nice effect. It sounds like a reverse tom. Have a listen with the overheads. So it's kind of cool. And then all together. So, you might not use this brush overdub throughout the whole context of the song. you might chop it up. And likewise, we've got washes, and similarly, I've done quite an aggressive high-pass filter on the washes, and they're very low within the mix. A little bit of sparkle added around, where are we? 8.6K. So that's pretty much it. I hope this has given you some inspiration and made you feel better maybe about your drum recordings. Made you feel like you can go and experiment and you don't have to stick to the rules necessarily. You know, try out some different preamps, try out some unusual esoteric gear, you know. Yeah, I'll play you out with this. Happy recording. I'll see you next time.